Hello and welcome to The Entrepreneurial Musician, a newsletter, coaching service, podcast, and blog preparing today's musicians for tomorrow's realities. This is TEM289 titled, Have a Strong Opinion, But Beware. Thank you to Parker Mouthpieces for providing the hosting for TEM. Parker Mouthpieces offers fine, customizable component mouthpieces for horn, trombone, euphonium, and tuba, including the Andrew Hitz Artist Model Tuba Mouthpiece. You can find out more at parkermouthpieces.com, parkermouthpieces.com. I'm leaving that in. Do you know how many times I have said that between spots on the Brass Junkies and on TEM? And I just tripped up on that. Find out more at parkermouthpieces.com or follow them on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Okay, if you are not subscribed to the Portfolio Career Playbook, the newsletter from TEM Coaching, here's what you missed in last week's Quartet of Ideas. Zero-time habits. This is a very simple concept, as a lot of the best ones are, but was new to me. A zero-time habit is something you don't do so that you can do more of what you want. That was the most popular link this week, and it really resonated with me. Another one, it was a quick article about will you react or will you respond to challenging situations, and talked about like sunk costs, which is something I've talked about a lot on the show because and I'm guessing you listening to this need to hear about it a lot because it's really hard to ignore sunk costs. A really cool article on making great YouTube thumbnails. It's amazing how important, and there's data behind this, how important great thumbnails are on YouTube. So you can make a great video, and if your thumbnail's not any good, then it's not going to get the traction that it could, and you could easily argue should. And so that that article is a really great starting point for that. And then I share some wisdom that was handed down to me from a friend talking about, do you want to be happy or do you want to be right? And the music business is all about relationships, and that's like some of the best advice that I have ever received. So, and also a really wonderful quote as well, as always. And so anyway, check it out at signup.tem.fm, and you can learn more about that and subscribe and get it sent right to your inbox every single week. Okay, TEM 289. Have a strong opinion, but beware. First, why you need to have a strong opinion in the first place. The number one risk for any of us in the music business today is blending in. That is the biggest problem that we face. It's not piracy. It's not a bunch of other things that used to be hot topics. It is not standing out. And the only way to stand out is by having an opinion. There is so much competition if you are going to have a YouTube channel or host a podcast or have an Instagram feed or any of the ways that you can put yourself and your art out there in order to be able to monetize it and to be able to find your audience, find the people who you are meant to serve with your art, whatever that art is. But you can't do what others do. Like, you can't go to the same channels, meaning like YouTube or Instagram or podcasts or whatever, the same medium, and use the same words to talk about the same things in the same way that are distributed the same way to the same people, and then expect to stand out, of course. So what's the solution? The solution is you have to have an opinion, and you have to have an angle, okay? Here's a case study for you, the Brass Junkies. I'm using a self-serving case study here, but there's actually a funny anecdote, which is why I'm choosing the Brass Junkies, which I'm guessing will put a smile on your face. It's a review that's a little harsh. Anyway, I'm spoiling the payout here. The Brass Junkies is not a traditional interview show. For those of you who have never heard it, first of all, congratulations. No, we are 209 episodes into the Brass Junkies. It it started just before TEM, but it's every other week. And it until episode 200, it was myself and the same co-host every week, Lance LeDuc, who's my knucklehead friend and former colleague from Boston Brass. And from the very beginning, we established that we wanted to create a space where it was Lance and I hanging out, essentially, with some important brass player, some well-known brass player. And we did not want it to be an interview show where we were asking the same people that are interviewed on all of the brass podcasts. There weren't as many as there are now. the asking them the exact same questions in the same way, in the same order, with like the same obvious follow-up questions. We wanted ours to be a little bit looser than that, and we wanted to be able to sometimes experience it for ourselves when it's somebody that we didn't know, but we wanted to be able to give people a look behind the curtain at these Carol Jansch, the tuba player of the Philadelphia Orchestra, a little bit of what it's like to hang out with Carol, right? And so it's not just asking her about alternate fingerings or heavy valve caps. So, that's all good, right? This leads beautifully into the but beware part of today's show title, however. First, a little background, which is going to sound like bragging, although I'm very proud of what we've done. But right now on Apple Podcasts, I just checked like 2 days ago, 271 ratings on Apple Podcasts, which is not bad, with a 4.9 star average. So you see that top line, the 5 stars is like really long, and then there's a couple of really, really short ones on the, much lower. It's been downloaded in over 100 countries around the world, and it's downloaded in over 100 countries every year. I always check out like the annual report when January rolls around. We have lots of loyal listeners, some great support via Patreon. But check out this 1-star review from, it turns out it's from a couple of years ago. I just stumbled upon it over the weekend. The title of the review is Sophomoric, and the review, which is short and sweet, reads, quote, "If you want to listen to a couple of morons interview talented musicians, then this is the podcast for you." End quote. So this person thought that the Brass Junkies is so bad that they wanted to warn others. So that's funny because I've listened to lots of podcasts where I'm just like, wow, that person's really not my speed, or this is not for me, or even like I hated it, but I've never left a review. I have downvoted YouTube videos of like, say, someone who's teaching tuba, one of these like expert channels, when they're telling you to like not move your shoulders when you breathe, which, like look in a mirror and take a really deep breath, your shoulders move, right? So that's harmful advice. So I would downvote that, because if enough people do that, then somebody who doesn't know any better will see that and be like, I know they hide the downvotes now, but you know what I'm saying, right? People see it and go like, oh, this is actually not credible tuba advice. But I would never, just because you have a podcast that is not really my speed, would I like give you a 1-star rating. This person felt the need, they were so aggrieved that they felt the need to leave a 1-star rating and to warn others. Here's the thing though. If we were a serious interview show, maybe this person who left this beautiful review might be a super fan of the Brass Junkies, but I'm going to guess not, because there's actually a lot of places where you can listen to the same caliber of guests that we, now I with co-hosts, interview, but that are asked much more predictable questions, and don't do like tangents off of tangents. Before every interview, I tell when I'm giving like the pre recording prep, I tell them, I'm like, don't worry about going on a tangent. Like, I can always bring it back around. And but we like the tangents. We like to just, it's not like when you're hanging out with somebody over dinner that you're like, okay, unless it's a meeting, but that's not a hang, right? Like, it's not like, okay, we need to cover these 4 topics in this order. No, you just like, oh, we never talked about blah. Okay, we'll do that next time, right? And so sometimes we leave big holes, but we get to go like really deep into specific things. I find that interesting, being the person who's doing the is a part of the hang, if you will. I also find that interesting when I'm listening to podcasts. I would rather listen to something that's like long form like that and really kind of gets to the person that's behind the art or behind the athlete or whatever. Some people don't have time for that. Even if they did, they don't want it. And they're not wrong, and I'm not right. Everybody basically gets to have their own take on things. But if we were a serious and more predictable interview show, which that sounds like I'm being critical saying predictable, I'm not. If we were a serious and predictable interview show, we would not have the audience that we have now. because the show would be completely different. And there are some people who have paid us for via Patreon, supported the show financially for like years. I mean, the show's been around for like 8 years or something, and Patreon's like 7 years old. We've got some people who've been paying us for 7 years running. I don't think that maybe they support every single brass interview show that there is, but I'm guessing that there's something about ours which really spoke to them. And maybe there's 10 times that many people who listened and were like, I came here to hear Jens Lindemann. I'm not going to check any of the other interviews out because they're sophomoric, right? So, but the problem is that if we did that, we would be fungible with a lot of other podcasts, and then we would blend in, and that's bad. Okay, so that is in fact the biggest danger. So you have to have an opinion. And when someone comes to the Brass Junkies, or I know I haven't been doing interviews lately with TEM, but say an interview with TEM, they come for, let's just say, Jens Lindemann, because I just said him. And then they hear that the hosts actually have like an opinion and have an angle, and that there's a something here. They might hear it and go like, or they might hear it and go, actually, that's really interesting, and I could hear them interview people that I have never heard of before because I really enjoy how they approach it. Otherwise, Jens brings his audience for the Jens interview, and then they immediately bounce. And because they were there for Jens, you actually need people there for the host. And that's why I share some opinions. I hear about it sometimes on TEM, which people are not down with. But if I didn't, then I might have less people dislike it, but I'd also have less people like it. I would be fungible. This thing would go under because it would have no traction. So you got to have an opinion. But as soon as you do, there are going to be people who end up, if you do it long enough and your opinion is loud enough, which it should be, you're going to get some 1-star ratings, and you should view that as a badge of courage. And I'll be honest with you, if we had gotten that review in like the second month, like after the third episode, that would have bummed me out. I would have lost sleep over it. When I read this, genuinely I thought it was hilarious. I haven't sent it to him yet, but I screenshotted it and I'm sending it to Lance because it's going to make him laugh too. So, but yeah, that I only got to that place. It helps to have 250 of the 271 ratings are 5 stars. So that really does help. Okay, today's quote is from author and thinker Mokokoma Mokhonowana. Quote, "Others have the right to criticize you unfairly, and you have the right to ignore them." I'm not going to argue that the aforementioned reviewer of the Brass Junkies was wrong, but I am going to say that the Brass Junkies is clearly not for them. Just like the annual celebration in my Facebook feed of the people who are almost always older than me, and I'm 47 for the record, I'm knocking on 50. They're always, every year they complain about the Super Bowl halftime show and say it sucked, and say that they don't get it, or the one that really makes my blood boil, that they really need to have, quote, real musicians do the halftime show again. But I promise you that the intended audience, when Rihanna wrote those songs and when she was performing them at the Super Bowl, her intended audience was not 70-year-old retired band directors. They just weren't. And those are the people that I see just in my corner of the world who seem to complain about the Super Bowl halftime show every single year. That's not to say it's not for them, or that they can't enjoy it, or that they can't share their opinions, no matter how tone deaf they are. I'm not advocating for the repeal of the First Amendment and that government should pass a law saying that you can't share stupid opinions about Rihanna. I'm just saying that Rihanna has the right to ignore them, just like I have the right to smile at that Brass Junkies review and ignore it as well. And just don't let the people who it's never was intended for them in the first place, don't let their feedback change what you do or who you do it for. If the people you're doing it for have feedback, absolutely take it. But there's that famous quote, like, you should never listen to the criticism of someone you wouldn't take advice from. I think that that's pretty eloquent. And so just realize that if you have opinions, you got to be aware, like, people are going to come and they're going to come in hot with takes, and you have the right to ignore them. And a lot of times you should. Thank you so much for listening to episode 289 of TEM. Thank you for your attention, as always. Thank you for leaving a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts, unless you're going to leave me a 1-star review. And then I would just point out, it's a pain to log on. It's it's probably not worth your time. But if you really hate TEM that much, what the hell are you doing listening to the closing of an episode? Yeah, anyway. But for those of you who have gone, thank you so much. It really is helpful, and it helps to balance out the 1-star reviews. And that is going to do it for this episode of The Entrepreneurial Musician.